All right, so we are in the middle of our discussion on the Jewish people crossing the Jordan to get into the land of Israel under Joshua's leadership. And before Shavuos, we discussed the nature of the actual crossing. As soon as the Kohanim, who are leading the Jewish people carrying the ark, which is an anomaly, usually the ark is in the middle and the Levites are carrying it, whereas here it's the Kohanim in the front. As soon as they put their feet into the water, the river that's flowing down stops where they are, them serving as a sort of dam. And the water starts piling up, whereas the water that's flowing down keeps on flowing down until the Jewish people go across. And we had different opinions as to how high the water piled before the Jewish people were actually able to cross. So now at this juncture, the Gemara tells us about a speech that Yeshua gives as they are in the river making their way across. So the line begins to the word v'lekama, and then it says oidam. Okay. Oidam b'Yarden, they're still in the Jordan on dry land. And Amalam Yehoshua tells them, De'u, you shall know, Alma atam oivim Yarden. For what purpose are you crossing the Jordan? The reason you're crossing the Jordan is so that you will inherit the land that is before you. As the verse reads earlier in Bamidbar, when Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to the Jewish people, telling them what you're going to do. There it says, you'll inherit the land from all the inhabitants of the land that is before you. So Moshe Rabbeinu already told them why you're crossing the Jordan, and now Yeshua is reminding them while they're in the Jordan.
Didn't the group go before him and they all got killed?
I mean, after the spies, there was the attempt.
They crossed the Jordan.
After the spies.
Oh.
After the spies failed, there was an attempt by some people to go inherit the land. Yeah, it's just an unrelated, I mean, maybe related, but not the incident we're discussing here.
No.
Yeah. So Yeshua tells them, look, Moshe Rabbeinu told you that the reason we're crossing the Jordan is so you inherit the land. So that's what we're going to do. Now he continues, Imatum oisim kain, if you do that, if you inherit the land in front of you, muta, very good. Lav, and if you don't inherit the land in front of you, bayin mayim, the waters will come, v'shoitrin oisichem, and will drown, and he uses this unique phrasing, Hebrew word being oisichem, which is a strange phrase. Usually you say oischem, which means you in the plural, but there's a yud there, which makes it strange, oisichem, as opposed to just oischem, you in the plural. It'll drown you if you don't cross. So says the Gemara, my oisichem, what is the meaning of this word oisichem? Says the Gemara, it's a combination of two words, oisi, I, v'itchem, and you too. This is literally the speech. I'm going to attempt to offer a deeper explanation based on what we learned last time, but for now, this is the literal meaning. Sorry?
Seems like in Stein Sotah, it says, in order to drive out the inhabitants of the land, I guess that's the
inherit, yeah, so that
more specific.
Drive out the inhabited land is like a colloquial translation. The literal translation would be inherit. But inherit the land from those people means you drive them out.
Right.
To get it, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I should have said that, yeah. Inherit the land means, that's what it means.
Drive out inhabitants
means
because of their evil ways and such.
Because God decided to give it to you. Right, that's what we learned in the first Rashi in Bereshis. Rashi asks, why did the Torah have to begin with Bereshis? Just begin with the commandments. Answer, to inform the world. God runs the world and he decided to give the land of Israel to these people. And then he decided to take it away from these people and give it to these people. So it so happens that the Torah does discuss that they are idol worshippers and so on, to drive them out. But in essence, they're going there because God told them to. That's the land belongs to them for them to fulfill their purpose. Okay, so this is what he tells them. We're crossing the Jordan to drive out the people, to inherit the land. If you do that, good. If not, it's drowning both you and I in this word, oisichem. Oisi meaning I, and chem coming from the word etchem, you. The speech continues. Oidem edabrim, oidem beyardin, they are still in the Jordan. And Amalur and Yeshua tells them the following. In order to properly understand this, I'm going to pause now for a second. Go to the book of Yehoshua and read a few verses, specifically 4 verses, which will help us understand this better. A little more, 6 or 7 verses. So the verses read as follows. This is in the book of Joshua, chapter 4. Reads, and it was when all the nation completely passed over the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, take to yourselves 12 men from the people, a man from every tribe. Verse 3, and command them, saying, one person from each tribe, take to yourself from here out of the moist of the Jordan. Oh my gosh, good point, midst. Thank you. My mind saw that we're talking about wet sand. No, midst of the Jordan, meaning take it from the place of the Jordan.
Although it could have some extra meaning, the water from the Jordan, let's not get into the details.
In the midst of the Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm. Okay, so the priests are standing there holding the water up. Take from there, 12 stones, each one from each tribe carrying 1 stone, and you shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you shall lodge this night. So that's 1 set of stones that God commands Yehoshua to tell the people. They should each take 1 stone and bring it to the place where they're going to spend the night, the next stop. Verse 4, and Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared for the children of Israel, a man from every tribe, in fulfillment of God's command. And Joshua said to them, pass before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and lift up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, 1 for each tribe. Verse 6, that this may be a sign amongst you, that when your children ask you in time to come, saying, what are these stones for you? Verse 7, then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial to the children of Israel forever. Verse 8, that they did that indeed. Verse 9, they established it. Okay, now another thing. Now, verse 9 reads like this. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood, and they have been there to this day. Now, if you read this quickly without thinking, you might assume we're talking about the same set of stones. But a closer reading indicates that's not the case. There's 12 stones that are taken to the place of the staying. And here it describes, after verse 8 says that the children of Israel did what Joshua commanded them and took 12 stones to the place where they are going to stay. Verse 9 states that Joshua took 12 stones and set them up back where the priests are. So it's a separate set of stones. And that is what the Gemara is going to comment on.
In
Clear?
Ezekiel,
We clear on this? Yeah, okay.
in Ezekiel, they talk about stones in a circle. I forgot what the name was. It was a funny name.
I don't know.
With the cherubim.
Remember. Okay, so Yeshua tells them then. Now back to the Gemara. Oidam b'yarden is still in the Jordan after he tells them, look, we're going to take the land. You don't want to take it? We're drowning here. Then he goes on to say, Amalan Yeshua tells them, in commandment and fulfillment of God's command, each of you please take 1 stone on your shoulders, the Mispah Shifti Yisrael, in accordance with the number of the tribes of Israel, 1 from each tribe. The verse reads, these 12 stones shall be a sign amongst you, when your children at some later date will ask you, what are these stones doing here, etc. It is a sign and testimonial for the generation to come, that our forefathers crossed the Jordan. Part 2 of the speech. Part 1, if you're taking the land, good. If not, we're drowning. Part 2, 12 stones, we're taking it to where we're going and setting up as a monument forever.
Is each leader had a stone?
The verse said that he chose 12 men, one from each tribe. Doesn't say who they were. Maybe the commentary there discuss it. I don't know.
Just not Nasi.
There is a Nasi for each tribe. But it doesn't say specifically to ask the Nasi. No, maybe the commentaries, I'm sure they're discussing.
Sure.
Yeah. Amlam Yeshua. Now Yeshua tells them part 3 of the speech. Take from here, from amongst the Jordan, from the midst of the Jordan, from where the feet of the Kohanim stand. This is still in fulfillment of God's command. But it's not exactly, because the Gemara is associating this description with the second stage. Okay, well, let's see. So he tells them, take a stone from where the Kohanim stand, 12 stones. Take them with you, and you'll place them in the place where we spend the night. So says the Gemara, maybe perhaps every time they stop, they have to put 12 stones. Talmud Sotah says the verse, you only have to put it in the place where you're resting tonight. Okay, so before we go forward, the Gemara is going to discuss the size of those stones and then infer from there the size of the fruits that the spies came back with them when they went to the land of Israel. I'm going to deduce from that, which we'll discuss later. But first, a comment on this little speech here. Well, what is the deeper significance of the speech? They know they're crossing the Jordan to take the land of Israel. What's with the threat that they're going to drown here? What is that about? And then how does that link with the stones? Stones going from the earth, from the Jordan. Yeah, from the Jordan and taking it to where they're staying. And then there's the second set of stone, which I mentioned there's 3 parts of the speech, right? There's one where he says you're going to drown here. Number 2, take for like a stone that's going to be a memorial. And then the next one is take from the feet of the Kohanim, which we're not really clear on what that was. That, says Rashi, that is the stone that they established at the 2 mountains, right? The mountains where the curse and the blessings were, and that's where they brought their offerings, and that's the one that they later covered in plaster and brought to Gilgal. So it's a separate set of stones. Okay, so what's going on here on a deeper spiritual level? So perhaps as follows. We discussed in the previous class, discussing the Jordan and the crossing of the sea and the crossing of the river and then the crossing of the river where Mashiach comes. They all indicate a revelation of that which is ordinarily concealed. Godliness, we described that the ocean presents a world in which the inhabitants of the ocean are in direct conscious contact with their source of life, the water, whereas we humans walk above our source of life, the earth. So our world represents the world of a sense of independent conscious from godliness, independent from our source, at least in our thinking. Whereas the ocean represents a kind of life where they're directly conscious of their source.
But we don't think that our source of life comes from the air we breathe.
We were created from the earth, not from the air. At the 6 days of creation, we were created from the earth.
From the earth, yes.
Right. So the place from which we are,
But
I meant the source from which we come from. We come from the earth, yet we feel independent of it. We walk above it. Whereas the fish were created from the water, and they still swim in the water. Right? So we're created from God, but we see ourselves as independent. It's a metaphor. Right? Whereas the ocean, the fish are created from the water, but they don't see themselves independent from the water. They swim in the water. So it represents a world in which they're conscious of the godliness, the spiritual realm. Yeah. And then the splitting of the sea indicates that us who live on dry land, as the Pasuk said, they opened the sea and they walked on dry land, right? So us who live on dry land, us who ordinarily feel independent from godliness, we're exposed to the world of truth that God's the only reality. And then each of these splittings of the sea coming out of Egypt, the river going into Israel, and then the river into Mashiach's time, the verse describes it, the splitting of the sea, the river then too, all indicate, as we go through this monumental shift in our relationship with God, first going to get the Torah, then going to our homeland, and then coming into Mashiach, there's a splitting of the sea. We're being exposed to new revelation of divine consciousness. And in that sense, perhaps then the following. And first preface, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist, but I can't say it doesn't exist because I don't know every single source. But to the best of my knowledge, no such threat was made to the Jewish people as they're crossing the sea when they leave Egypt. They weren't told, if you don't take the Torah, you're drowning here. I mean, maybe, I don't know. If someone's watching and knows such a source, please tell me, and then discount what I say. But I haven't encountered such a source, I don't know. I'm saying this because when the Jewish people left Egypt and were taken to Mount Sinai, for the most part, like I say, it's a revelation from God from above to below. Right? And we describe this experience at Sinai, right? The borders between heaven and earth are taken away. Earth can now climb to heaven through Torah and mitzvahs. Heaven can now come to earth through Torah and mitzvahs. And God says, I'll begin the journey. And there the verse says, God came down to the mountain. That's to say, the revelation was God exposing himself as opposed to us discovering him. We haven't had the ability to discover him yet. We were given the tools to discover him through Torah and mitzvahs. At that point, we were stuck in impurity, yanked out. We had to demonstrate our self-sacrifice. Yes, we're dedicated to the cause without knowing what that is yet, right? We will do and we will hear. That's what we said. We had no idea what it's about. We said, yes, whatever it is, we'll do it. We haven't had the tools yet to do all that good stuff. And likewise, represented by Nachshon ben Aminadab, who jumps into the river and walks until the water comes to his nose, right? Where he says, no idea how this is working, but I'm going forward because you said. Right? Whereas now they're coming into the land of Israel. What's expected of them now? They're leaving the spiritual cocoon of the desert. No more manna, no more clothes growing with you, no more clouds of glory. Now you got to work. And before they work the land, before they start to discover God from the bottom up through their Torah mitzvahs, they have to fight for it, right? They have to fight literally the enemies of the land to eradicate them, to get rid of them so that they can flourish in this relationship. But they got to put that work in, right? Certainly there's going to be miracles along the way and God's going to assist, but they have to put that work in. And before they do that, there's a splitting of the river. There's another divine revelation. And here Joshua says, listen, the reason why you're getting this revelation now is not like the first time around where God's just choosing you and saying you're Jewish because you dedicated yourself and that's it. You got to work now. If you're not willing to put in the work, you're going to drown. Meaning to say, at this point, you can just be consumed by divine revelation. Be drowned in the sea, the river representing divine revelation. So you can drown here, but you have completely missed the point. The only reason why God's revealing himself is so that you can go to the land, work it, inherit it, get rid of the idol worship, and work your way up to serve Hashem. That's what there's revelation here. So know why this is happening. Because if not, you'll get stuck in the spiritual state and not really get where you're supposed to. This is reminiscent of the Maimer that you guys are learning, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? Where the Maimer explained, Rabbi was teaching the Maimer in the morning, the Gemara's describing the 4 people who entered Pardes, 4 people who entered into a spiritual journey known as Pardes, the garden. The Gemara explained, the Maimer explains in detail the various different details of the story. But essentially what happened was four people entered into the spiritual state. One went in there, never came out, stayed there. One went in, came out, became an apostate. One went in, came back, and had some sort of mental and nervous breakdown. And the fourth, Rabbi Akiva, went in and came out okay. That's right. So the version of the different versions of the story, different texts. And one of the texts reads that Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and came out in peace. Now, seemingly, the point here is not that he went in peace. The point is he came out peacefully. That's the point. If you enter in peace properly, then you will come out in peace properly. Meaning to say, when you enter a state of spiritual exaltation, spiritual ecstasy, if you're not entering with the right intention, you'll get stuck in that spiritual ecstasy or have a negative effect in that spiritual ecstasy. If the intention is, I want to lose myself in here because this is amazing and unbelievable, then you might just get stuck there. Or you might come back with an adverse effect. You have to go into that spiritual experience knowing why you're going in there. And the reason you're going into that spiritual experience is to be inspired so you can come out of the spiritual experience and serve God in a normal physical world. And thus he tells them as you enter the Jordan, if you don't have the proper intention now, that the reason why we're going into this state of miraculous revelation of God, the sea is splitting, you're being revealed, exposed to godliness. If you don't know now, the reason you're doing this is that you can go to a land and work a human physical world and serve God, then you're going to get stuck in the spiritual state, or worse, have a bad effect. The river will drown you.
That's what happened to Aaron's two sons.
That's what happened to Aaron's two sons. They entered that state of ecstasy and didn't come back.
Right.
That's what Joshua's warning them.
Selfish reasons.
You're going into the spiritual state of ecstasy because the sea is splitting. You're being exposed to divine revelation. Know why you're going in. Otherwise, you're drowning here. Otherwise, you're going to have an adverse negative effect. You either get lost here or worse, come back disenchanted, disillusioned, right? This is true of our own lives also. We all go through different journeys, which are, sometimes the intention is, I'm looking for a spiritual high, but know why you're looking for the spiritual high. Because the high is good. You'll get stuck there or have a negative effect. Know to begin with, you're going to get that spiritual high injection so that you can bring it back to your family, bring it back to your friends, bring it back to your normal life, bring it back to the land of Israel and inherit the land, not lose yourself in that spiritual river. That's perhaps what the speech that Yehoshua is saying, which is why he tells them to take stones. Take stones from the midst of the Jordan. Take something from that inspiration and bring it with you to the land so that forever it stays there. So in the land, in your physical life, you bring this inspiration with you. So it's true that you're not supposed to get lost in this inspiration and just drown in this river. But don't leave it behind. Take something with you. And what are you taking with you? Not water, a stone. Take something concrete. When you're in that spiritual state of excitement, take a resolution, a stone that's forever going to be firmly planted that says, forever. You know why I'm doing this? Because I was inspired on this circumstance. Take the stone with you as like an inspiration. Take a concrete something from the verse keeps on saying twice, 3 times, from the midst of the Jordan, from inside the Jordan, go to the deepest part of that inspiration, grab something concrete and take it home. Sorry?
Don't use concrete.
Yeah, the stone. Concrete as in like something tangible, something hard and fast. Take that with you so the inspiration stays. And each tribe takes their own. The hachlata of this Jew is not the same as the hachlata from that Jew. These guys got their own hachlata, their own resolution that they can take from their inspiration that becomes the stone that says, your children, grandchildren ask you, well, why do you do this? Because I was once inspired and I decided to bring it home and that's why I do this. And that indeed inspires the children and inspires the family and inspires everybody else. Because I've taken something from that inspiration to bring home with me. I'm not just lost in the inspiration of keeping 2 separate worlds, my inspiration world and my regular world, my river and my land.
I thought the stones were because it was a miraculous thing that happened.
Yeah,
They laid the stones there.
that's the literal level. Just giving a
Okay.
kind of deeper level
Okay.
what this represents, right? Miraculous means high inspiration.
Right.
And the stone is there as like a concrete monument, physical thing that I'm doing, a physical thing I'm doing every day based on that miraculous inspiration.
Monument that something special happened in that.
Correct. So the parallel is when I'm in a state of inspiration, I make a resolution that I do in my day-to-day life, And I can point to it and say, that's because of the inspiration. That's the stone I carry with me from that river.
How does this Oisichem marry with what we're saying now?
So that's a good question. And I was thinking about that. And that it's like the Rebbe Chassid relationship. He doesn't say Oisanu us. He says you and me, but says so in one word. It's almost like, on one hand, the Rebbe is head and shoulders above the Chassidim. He's a separate entity. But at the end of the day, in your failure, so is the Rebbe's failure, so to speak, because we're bound up together. And if you decide to go the wrong route, I'm stuck in here with you too. He doesn't say we are stuck. He says you and I are stuck, but puts them together, right? As in Yehoshua, the one who's providing this inspiration, leading the Jewish people, the Kohen, and holding the water up, providing all this inspiration. He's telling the guys, you got to take this inspiration so that you can actually take the land, because otherwise, you're doomed. And if you're doomed, so am I. There's a symbiotic relationship here.
So the us in Oisichem
is created of one and two.
Us and the Rebbe.
Yeah.
And them is everyone else coming with us.
There is no word them. So I'm saying it's only you and us. He doesn't say, you and me. Oisi and Eschem, me and you. He doesn't say, if you misbehave, the river will drown us. Instead of saying us, he says, you and I. Right? As if to say we're separate entities, but we're stuck together. I mean, because Yehoshua is a head and shoulders above everybody else. And he doesn't have any intention to mess this up. But if the Jewish people do, they'll drag him down too. Which is why instead of saying us, he says you and I, but puts that into one word. Because there's the Rebbe Chassid dynamic is such that even though the Rebbe is head and shoulders above a Chassid, at the same time, the Rebbe is only as strong as his Chassidim are. Right? Like the analogy Chassidus uses often is for head and feet, literally head and feet. Head is what tells the feet where to go. Right? So the head's in control here. But if feet don't walk, then the head's stuck at home, can't do anything. Right? So that's perhaps what this whole speech is about. And God willing, tomorrow we will look at the sizing of these stones. Right? Because one person carried a stone. One person carried one stone. And then we will compare that to the amount of fruit that the spies brought back from Israel, and therefore deduce from that how heavy those fruit were. And perhaps we'll try to link that up with our spiritual reading of this whole thing as well. All right, you have a wonderful day.
And we're still in Sotah, right?
And we're still in Sotah, which, by the way, is in the 6th parsha.
Yes.
Today's reading or tomorrow? Yesterday's reading. Today's reading is Sotah. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful day.
Parsha.
Sorry?
There was a big,
You did Chumash ready today?
what?
You did Chumash today already?
Yeah, it's huge.
It's long? Yeah, Nasa is one of the
It
longest.
took me like an hour to read.
Yeah, Nasa is one of the bigger parshas. Maybe the biggest even?
Seems to be,
Nasa is on the bigger side. It might even be the biggest. I don't remember.
took me like an hour to read it this morning.
Oh, wow.
So,
Good for you. Okay, good day, Yidden.
Where are we holding? On Gimel stuff?